Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 624. That Scrunchy ad. February 15th, 2021. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. Well, it's time once again for our Analysis of the Analysis show, a look back at this year's Super Bowl ad game. And this year was certainly unusual. From the holdouts to the host of first-time ad buyers to pandemic humor, we'll look at the winning and losing strategies. Also, how the brands extended the value this year, how the ads addressed issues of diversity, whether any newcomers will buy next year, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Manager of Digital and Advocacy Communications for IBM, Ms. Brandi Boatner. Brandi, hey, how are you?
Good. Hi, Bob. Great to be here.
Glad that you could make it to the program. Now, next, he's the host of Corona TV, author, speaker, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing well. Surprisingly, considering, but doing well.
Indeed.
And also with us, we have the CEO of social media education company Social Fresh, Mr. Jason Keath. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Bob. I'm excited to be back on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know. We've got three people who've been, have wanted back on the show for a long, long time, and all three of you are back on the show. And that brings up the next person. Finally, we welcome back the co-founder and CEO of Co-Collective, Ms. Rosemarie Ryan. Rosemarie, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to be back, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fantastic panel. It's one that I, would love to have on regularly, but you guys are all busy, and I love the fact that you could all come together in this one show. So let's just jump right into it, because this is the Analysis of the Analysis show. This is our annual look back at the not only the ads and the ad game that went on during the Super Bowl, but also an assessment of the general feel from the audience out there and from the press and the analysis that was done on the ads over the last week. And we got a lot to talk about. I mean, there was a lot of big moves in this year's Ad Bowl. I mean, Rosemarie, what happened was a lot of the big brands sat out, and a lot of these first-time brands that had never done the Super Bowl before suddenly came out and started doing it. It wasn't just new. It wasn't just new brands. It was also legacy brands that had never before thought about doing the Super Bowl. Let's talk a little bit about that first. Let's talk about the people who sat out, and then talk about the people who kind of came into the game for the first time. The two big sit-outs, the one that everybody talked about, were Budweiser and Ford, which came out with not much of a sit-out in the sense that they did a public service announcement that ended up being a big promotion for their company. So I'd love to get your thoughts on Budweiser's move, the strategy they employed, the move by Ford. Were they successful? Was it an interesting ad? Did they have a good strategy behind it? What are your thoughts?
I guess the first thing I would say is I agree with you that I don't think they were really sitting out. They certainly set that expectation up ahead of time, and I think tried to build as much promotion around it as possible, but they were evident in the game. And, I mean, for me, the Ford commercial I thought was interesting. I think the reason they said they were sitting out is that they weren't directly talking to any one of their models, but really more to an ideal that they wanted everybody to get behind. I thought it was fine. I think it was ultimately not as great or as good as some of the other ones that were trying to do the same thing. And Budweiser was there. even when it wasn't actually, I thought that that Sam Adams unleashing the Clydesdales
I know.
towards the end was genius.
It was clumsy. It was a clumsy ad in the end, but the basic premise of it was kind of funny. I mean, just bringing the Clydesdales out and rubbing Budweiser's nose in it was kind of funny to start.
And it is the kind of underdog. It is the anti Budweiser, and so I think it made that point really clearly. But yeah, I think for me they were in the game. They were there. They weren't not there. So they weren't sitting out as much as I think they claimed they would be. And then, of course, Ford came back in a big way in answer to the GM commercial after the game, making it clear that they'd been in Norway for quite some time, and they were kind of welcoming GM to the country and to the whole electric vehicle discussion, which I thought was kind of genius.
It was kind of surprising to me, and I'll bring the rest of the crew in on this conversation at this point. I mean, it was kind of surprising to me, the whole kickback on the Norway thing. It was an okay commercial. It wasn't fantastic in my opinion, but it got a lot of attention and people really seemed to like it out there in the general audience. And it seemed to elicit a lot of feedback from Norwegian companies and also other companies that were doing business in Norway. I mean, Joe, what's your final summation on that particular aspect of the ad bowl?
For some reason, and I don't know, it's like a Yogi Bear, it's like deja vu all over again. I seem to recall in years gone by something similar, and it probably involved Will Ferrell as well. This idea of taking on a country. I'm almost certain that another brand once did it, took on a country, and then the country responded. And in that respect, Norway responded. There was some response, which was probably expected, and Norway probably patted themselves on the proverbial horns of their Viking hat or something, because, they, from a PR standpoint, it was part of the game. They probably, they were probably in cahoots with GM as well. But you know what? At the end of the day, I was watching with my wife, and, very unusual, unprecedented Super Bowl. Obviously, we were all watching in, probably with our core family unit. We were less drunk than normal. We weren't screaming and shouting and, in a party environment. And my wife just looked at me and she said, I have no idea what's going on. She didn't understand the product, the brand, it was completely lost on her. And I think this may be one of those times where you had a company or a brand trying to be way too clever for its own good, with the borrowed interest of Will Ferrell. And I just think maybe a lot of it got lost and went over the top, over the heads of 98.7% of people watching. I could be wrong.
I'd love to get Brandi's thoughts on this. For those of you who don't realize, just a couple of weeks ago, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, we did a ad roundup for the AMA of Southern Connecticut, and both Joe and Brandi sat on the panel. And I know that you had a strong reaction to this.
Best night of my life, by the way.
Likewise.
And I'd love, Brandi, for you to weigh in on this, because you had a pretty salient reaction to it during the panel discussion.
Yeah, same with Joe. I really didn't understand why we were picking on Norway, and they seem to be they're such a progressive country, and I appreciated the jokes at the end of the commercial when it's like, you're actually in Sweden or Finland. Because I had a layover in Finland on the way to Sweden, and I thought I was in the same place. So that I understood, but the overall commercial I didn't get, and I didn't understand why we were picking so badly on Norway. But I do agree, Bob, that the response as a result. So I watched and I was like, I don't really understand this. But then the response with like the Audi commercial and everyone being like, don't hate, congratulate. I'm like, oh, so I guess there's like a inside European, joke somewhere that maybe I didn't get the punchline to, but the response is what was the most surprising thing to me. And Will Ferrell's just not that funny. Maybe his moment is like over, but he just isn't that funny to me.
Yet it did so well on the ad meter. And for those of you who don't know what the ad meter is, USA Today runs the ad meter every single year. And the ad meter is basically a free-for-all of general consumers voting on the ad. So it's not industry perspective. It's not careful analysis and pulling apart the ads like we do in our business. It's simply first reactions. And that Norway spot did extremely well. Were there any surprises on the ad meter for you, Jason? I mean, it's just like it seemed like it was pretty straightforward. I mean, except for the 1 and 2 surprised me a little bit was Rocket Mortgage with Tracy Morgan on it. I always want to say Tracy Jordan. I just
Same guy.
Yeah, same guy. But
Rocket Mortgage was a huge shock to me because I just thought that was a noisy ad that I barely remembered was about mortgages. But its taste is, everybody has different taste, right? I mean, I loved the Will Ferrell ad, and two of my favorite ads were kind of in that picking an enemy mindset, being a challenger brand, and GM could never be a challenger brand, so they had to really make fun of the concept and just pick Norway as a
is that true? I mean, because GM could be considered a challenger brand when they're talking about EV in particular, because
for sure. But I mean, they're flipping a switch and making all electric vehicles all of a sudden. I mean, there's companies, maybe 5 companies in the world that could do the scale of auto production that they're trying to do as quickly as they're doing. So in some ways, for sure. And I think it helps them in their marketing to produce themselves as an up and coming competitor in a new space, for sure. And the other company that did that in the Super Bowl, I believe, came in last, which was my favorite ad, last on the USA Today meter, which was Oatly. And they're a true challenger brand, obviously, going up against Big Milk and Cow Milk in general, and doing that consistently for their brand, and doing it also in a sarcastic and a little bit more cringy way, because they did have a lot of people that hated that ad. But I think those are the two that stood out for me. Maybe I'm predisposed to that certain position of marketing, but I think those were two that really represented kind of two ends of the same scale for me that I remember.
What does the panel think about the Oatly ad in particular? I would love for you guys to weigh in on that, because it's just like the Oatly ad was so divisive, both in the general public and within the ad press. Everybody either loved it or hated it, and everybody had a lot of data behind it to prove their point. What do you guys think of that ad?
I think Oatly were true to who they were, which is, I think, the best thing you can be, whether you're on the Super Bowl or not. They are a kind of counterculture brand. I thought what they did afterwards, which was selling the T-shirts with the worst commercial on the Super Bowl. I mean, they kind of totally leaned in to who they were, and they broke every rule of what you're supposed to do on the Super Bowl, like amazing performance, well-known celebrity, massive production. They just turned that entire thing on their head, and I think that's how they think about themselves. Kind of against milk, which is the norm. So I thought that, I mean, when I watched, I thought, what the hell am I looking at? But I laughed after, and I thought the way they followed it up was brilliant. And I thought that Reddit did a very similar thing. Yeah. They're also both it's also kind of counterculture. And it again broke all the rules, broke all the norms, and got huge amounts of attention, both at the time and after. And I think the Super Bowl is about having a much longer conversation, Bob, right? It shouldn't end on that evening. If you're really going to get your money's worth, hopefully that conversation is going to continue post the Super Bowl, and you're going to be able to do amazing things with it. And
when I was watching the Oatly ad, I wasn't going with WTH. What the hell? I was going with WTF, which stands for Wakeman Town Farm. Actually, true story. I have a T-shirt that says WTF, which is Wakeman Town Farm, and I won that T-shirt in a pie eating competition. But anyway, that's another story for another day. One of my proudest moments of my life, winning amateur eating competition. But
is it a dairy farm or an oat farm?
It was, this was, I think, a rhubarb pie, and I had to eat it without the only way that you would want to, which is no hands. So it was just mouth first. And those little kids were crying when I beat them, but I didn't care because it was a bucket list item for me. But The Oatly commercial was just so insanely, bad, but not even trying to be good in a bad way. And I have to say, and I will argue both sides in fairness. On the WTF side, they have no business advertising in the Super Bowl. Such a niche product, and it's such a non-mainstream product and offering. But at the same time, that's exactly why they should be advertising in the Super Bowl, to go mainstream, to say, we can go toe to toe, we have arrived. And so time will tell whether that was just completely indulgent and an absolute colossal waste, or a really, really smart and premeditated buy. And I think the jury's out. So I've argued both cases, and in fairness, it may prove to be a genius buy.
I have to just tell you that if you go, when I used to be in the office and we had a fridge that was shared by everybody in there, I once went there and there was every other kind of milk, including Oatly, and there was no actual milk in the fridge. So I don't know that they're that niche anymore. I think that whole market has exploded and they've been leading it for, in many regards. So
they were the first, vegan milk in most coffee shops in the United States and Europe. They have ranked as a top 3 milk in most coffee shops in the U.S. for years now. I mean, I think a big thing to keep in mind with Oatly is they are approaching an IPO within the next few months, and I think this timing was very important for them. So it was a PR play, I think, more than anything. It was an opportunity for them to stand out in a way that was very on brand for them, which is, as was said, a challenger brand, counterculture, anti-establishment, anti-celebrity, anti-milk, all these things that really fall into their brand wheelhouse. So I in that regard, I think anybody that's talking about them, whether they hated it or not, is really kind of playing into what they wanted.
Isn't it interesting how we're actually talking about the Super Bowl is the place for challenger brands to to kind of arrive and announce themselves and take on the 800-pound gorilla? But Rosemarie, you were talking about Reddit, and for me, Reddit just won the Super Bowl. I mean, I immediately did exactly what they expected someone like me to do, which is I said, "What?" I paused.
Just to bring some perspective. We got to bring some perspective for the audience. If you missed the Reddit ad, it was a 5-second ad. They spent what was it like? Someone worked out the math.
I think it was $1 million.
$1 million or something like that for a 5-second ad that used the Wall Street bets fiasco, whatever you want to call it, as kind of the linchpin for how they were going to sell their service. And it was, again, Reddit's getting ready for an IPO too, right? Or are they have they already gone that way?
They're still private. I'm not aware of their IPO status right now, but I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were trying to get a lot of attention and ride that wave, and it was a last-minute buy, and it got a lot of attention, both good and bad. I mean, there were some detractors who said it was a waste of money. Others felt it was really successful. Joe, now that I've set that perspective, why don't you give us your thoughts?
Yeah, so as I was saying, I was looking, I was like, what did I just see? And of course, what do almost everyone have? They have a DVR or DVR functionality. And I paused it, I rewound it, and then I took a screenshot, or I took a photo, and proceeded to share that on all my social media channels. And quite frankly, whenever anyone was saying, "Hey, what was that Reddit? What happened? Did you see that?" I would just post or paste that screenshot. And I think they absolutely did what they needed to do. 1 week after the whole GameStop Wall Street bets, Robin Hood, kerfuffle, and that is brilliant. I mean, it could not have been more perfectly timed and targeted, and so that's probably the best $1 million that they've ever spent in their lives.
I agree. And then the Robin Hood commercial was probably the worst idea.
Terrible.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, they're really disliked, and there they were being themselves, and Reddit run away as the star, and they just looked like it was a big mistake. I think that was the biggest waste of money on the Super Bowl.
Well, the Robin Hood ad seemed like it was done before, the Wall Street Bet stuff happened and all of that controversy, and they just ignored that it was, kind of out of touch afterwards and ran with it anyways.
There were a couple ads that did really poorly. I want to get to that in a second, but I do want to round out the top list here for everybody. And Brandi, two of our favorite ads from that discussion on that couple Thursdays ago, they topped the list as well. I mean, the Amazon ad and the M&M's ad. So I felt like I did pretty well. I even called the Rocket Mortgage. I didn't call them as 1 and 2. That surprised me, but I called it as being, probably going to do well in the ad meter, and sure enough, it did. Mm-hmm. But Amazon and M&M's did really well. And the Kia ad, which is really an Olympics ad that they decided to run during the middle of the Super Bowl for some reason, that did well as well. So what are your thoughts on those ads?
Yeah, so those are my favorite ones. And I think just based on our conversation here, I think we might be, based on our conversation, we might be on to something. So the Amazon ad, aside from really liking to see Michael B. Jordan just in all of his glory and beautiful, he's just such a specimen of a man. And it is Singles Awareness Day, and I don't like his girlfriend, but it really was like, wow, this is it's a role reversal. It's not a woman being objectified, it's a man. And it just was funny and very timely. And then with the M&Ms, I love Dan Levy. I thought that was very funny and timely. And I think there's a trend, like what we're talking about here with, kind of rounding out from the Oatly conversation to the Reddit conversation is the Super Bowl kind of moving away from the ads, moving away from what it's been historically and traditionally, because 2020 was such a pivotal year for us all, everything has changed. Is this going to be the new for Super Bowl ads? Is it going to be more timely, more relatable? Like we said, Reddit at the witching hour comes in, something very relatable. It does well. I think Amazon also very relatable. The M&Ms with, what's happened and just kind of making fun of what's happened. Is this Bob, this is a question I would ask. Is this what we can expect moving forward, for companies who've never advertised in the Super Bowl before? It's like, hey, this might be our moment to go ahead and say something or showcase something that we haven't before. Didn't you say, Bob, that this year had the most first timers, that the most Super Bowl virgins than ever?
I think that's true. I mean, besides the first Super Bowl, which I'm sure would be the taker of it. But
probably had a lot of virgins there. Yeah. But with this one, just so many, do we think that just again, based on the ones that did really well, a random Olympics U.S. team, again, I love the commercial because it was very touching. But, that has a place in is this, are we seeing trends? Is this what we are seeing, like the Super Bowl ads being disrupted? Is this what it is? Is this the new?
I think that's a really good question, Brandi. I think if you look at the ad, the USA Today poll, I would say that most of the ads that did very well there follow, for me, a very familiar Super Bowl pattern. So using a celebrity, high production, there's what I guess they're humor. They're kind of crowd pleasers. I think they've followed that pattern. But you did have the kind of counterculture folks coming in and doing their thing their way. You did have some people putting a stake in the ground. I think it was a real mix of people trying to decide how to turn up. And there wasn't like one flavor of Super Bowl ads. And for me, I thought the Amazon ad was great. I thought the Rocket work was actually very, very good. I understand why it got 1 and 2. I walked away being really clear about what Rocket could give me. I think it was a real true human insight. Amazon was a brilliant insight. I mean, haven't we all, thought about, I have arguments with my husband all the time about the fact that Alexa listens to
woman,
him. Well, she also listens to him more than she listens to me. That's.
But Rosemarie, but you're not telling me, like, did you not like Michael B. Jordan? Did you not see when he took his shirt off?
No, I loved the Amazon.
Did you not see that? Because he's really nice to look
Brandi's messaging is very focused.
I'm just curious about that.
I love it.
Oh my God.
I noticed. I did notice that.
I mean, my response to you is probably yes and no in terms of is this the new kind of Super Bowl? Because first of all, I think in many respects we're kind of having a media conversation instead of a creative conversation, which has never really happened before. But I would say I think the reason why we saw everything the way we did play out the way it did was because of the hesitancy and the and everyone was so guarded and so ultra conservative because of everything going on with COVID and with the election, etc. Brands more than ever before have, at least the established brands, probably felt that they had the most to lose, and they were damned if they did and damned if they didn't, right? No matter what they did, they were going to be criticized. And so a lot of them probably either played it safe or pulled out. But the reality is that when we look at the way the world works and the way this business works, these are buys that are typically done quarters in advance, years, even years in advance. And in this case, fortune really did favor the brave, and fortune did favor, people that were prepared to move quicker. If this is the new way, then we're all then we're all better off, because, anything that accelerates the planning cycle and the execution cycle is good. Our business is struggling because of these long, elongated strategic planning functions where 5-year plans, and I kind of laugh when I hear brands are doing planning for like 2022, and I'm like, we don't even know what the hell is going. I mean, listen, with what happened at the Capitol on January 6th, we truly do not know what's going to happen next week, never mind next quarter or next year. So I have a feeling, though, that the pendulum will probably swing back to these, longer, elongated, cycles, but not as long as before.
It's a taste of the future a little bit, because it reflects what we see in digital and social every day, which is brands moving incredibly rapid to respond to things. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that just because everyone is pivoting and changing their tactics so much through the pandemic that they're willing to try new things. They're willing to step back or step forward depending on the brand. And I think we see that. And I agree, it's probably going to shift back a little bit, but I think some of these lessons are going to be learned. We all watched live video more than we ever have this year, and then it came back down to a pre-pandemic baseline. But there's more people that know how to turn on live video and broadcast it and listen to it than ever before. So those muscles don't get unlearned, and I think we'll see a little bit of this continue every year from this.
I also think that what happened. Sorry, Bob.
No, that's okay. You go ahead, and I'll bring it around after you.
I think there's like what happens actually at the game, and then there's what happens after the game. And so a lot of those, a lot of the kind of social networks are shaping how people feel about those commercials after they've seen them, because other things start to happen as a result of them, which again puts all of that planning to one side, because there are some of those things that you can anticipate and some of them that you just can't.
Well, I was going to talk about the negative brands, the brands that didn't do so well. We've already talked about Robinhood, but I think you bring up a great point, Rosemarie, which is the extension of the value in 2021. I mean, what were the big winners in your mind as far as the players out there who were advertising in the game, but then doing a good job of follow-up, doing a good job of pre-gaming it, doing a good job of extending that value for that $5 million that they were paying for the 30 seconds?
I mean, I do think that GM had anticipated some of what happened after. And I think they, I hear everybody saying it kind of seemed bizarre at the time, but they were putting their stake in the ground about a pretty big, commitment they're making. And they did it in a kind of very tongue-in-cheek way. And what happened afterwards, I think, continued that conversation. And more people now are aware of what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it, regardless of how they made it happen. So I think it played out very well for them. I thought that the whole Jeep conversation was fascinating. Personally, Let's
talk about that Jeep conversation a little bit more deeply, because in my mind, I mean, that was another divisive ad. I mean, it was supposed to be about unity. It ended up completely dividing the Twitter over it. I mean, some people loved it. Some people absolutely hated it. For me, it falls in a bad category. It wasn't effective. It was trying too hard to make everybody believe that we all needed to live together in peace and harmony when, that's just not what's happening here in the United States right now. And your ad for it, for a Jeep, is not going to change me on that mode. So why do you think it's a strong ad? Why do you think it was effective?
Well, I don't think that we all have to agree on something in order for it to be a good ad. I think
absolutely.
Sometimes good advertising actually makes you kind of take a stand back and decide where you stand. So watching it, I really enjoyed it. Afterwards, I probably a little surprised at the amount of backlash that I saw as a result of it. A lot of it originally because people couldn't understand why Bruce Springsteen had decided to sell out and finally put himself into a commercial.
Yeah, it was his first advertisement he'd ever done.
His first ad. But I thought in the moment watching it, I was taken in. Afterwards, I understand. I don't think they expected everybody to suddenly be unified. I think they were saying this is what we want to stand for and believe in as a brand, and that's a brave thing to do.
Does everybody else agree with that? I mean, did everybody else feel like that was a strong ad? Because that's not something that we talked about during our pregame show. It was not released early enough, as far as I know, to have talked about it. But I mean, Brandi, what are your impressions of that particular ad? Did it affect you? Were you positively spun by that?
I was not, and I am a Bruce Springsteen fan, but the whole unity, cowboy, white male, America's great, just was completely lost on me as a Black female in America, watching that commercial, knowing what I have experienced and continue to experience, and a 2-minute ad to show the greatness of America. Like, it just, for me, I didn't like it. And again, I'm a Bruce Springsteen fan. The whole, why would he decide to, this be the ad that you do? Were there political motivations? Like, all kinds of things afterwards, after I saw it. But watching it, I was not like, oh my God, I'm so proud to be an American. But again, maybe that's just my perspective.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? Because it's just like, for me, that was, for me, I could see why it was so divisive. I mean, it was a well-produced ad. And then it seems like the ad was cursed from the beginning as well, because not only did it cause the reaction not to be what I'm sure the brand had hoped it would be in toto, I think that it also had the problem of Bruce Springsteen just got exposed for a kind of, well, let's just say he had a DUI, a DWI.
Yeah. DWI.
DWI.
He was very much so intoxicated.
And it's like, there's some debate over whether or not he was below the legal limit, but was arrested anyway. But he was arrested, and now they have to take the ad off the air, and they can't run it again, so they're not going to get any extended value out of this. It seems like, Bruce, the lesson here is Bruce shouldn't be doing ads.
I mean, I'll tell you something. I approach the Super Bowl every single year the same way, which is I try and be like a human being, like a consumer, air quotes, which is I don't seek out the commercials. If they appear in front of me, if I'm watching television and someone's talking about them, I'm not gonna stick my fingers in my ears. And so we did this panel together. We never discussed this in particular. Here's the thing. I watched the entire Super Bowl. I don't recall, needing to go and make a sandwich or go to the toilet or anything. I don't remember the ad. I never saw it. And if I did, I really don't remember it. So I have absolutely no commentary or point of view whatsoever on the ad because I didn't see it and it never appeared in my consciousness. Now, that said, there is a general response to any time a brand that has no equity or foundation or credibility to start preaching about how we should live our lives and about what some kind of idealistic version is of the country we're living in, it just falls flat. It's kind of in the playbook, the 101 playbook. Unless you're Nike, unless you're Patagonia, unless you're Ben and Jerry's, unless you're a company that actually lives this as your as your purpose every single day of your life, you probably would do well to just shut the hell up and stop preaching to us and patronizing us. And I just don't understand why brands don't get the message, and they continue to, they take their left foot out their mouth in order to insert the right foot.
I mean, I don't think Jeep was stepping that far into purpose necessarily. Yeah. They weren't going over a fence, but I do think they kind of wasted Bruce Springsteen. I mean, I do think if you have just had an insurrection where people attacked the Capitol building, maybe a message of unity is not going to land as well. But I think this was a reflection of the backstory of this. Is the CEO had been trying to get Bruce Springsteen to do a Jeep ad for 10 years, and he finally said yes. And I think they were like, all right, we're going to do this big. We're going to do 2 minutes. We're going to go America, America, America. And they just kind of got caught up in that. I think they should have just gone Jeep, Jeep, Jeep. And also, I think the ad probably played really well for people that love Jeeps. I mean, most people that love Jeep probably love Bruce Springsteen, and I think it probably connected to them. And I do recognize some of the problems with it, but I don't necessarily believe that it didn't land for, a lot of people out there that are a good customer base for them.
Go ahead, Rosemarie. I was just going to say, I do think they got a little into brand purpose with this whole meet in the middle. And that's what upsets me, because it's like, all we need to do is just like really meet in the middle. Look, I'm in Kansas. It's like in the middle. Like if, you blink, you miss it. I'm in the middle of the country. Like did we meet in the middle when the Black Lives Matter protest happened at the Capitol and there was like thousands of like police and National Guard, ready to like attack for a peaceful protest? Did we meet in the middle then? Are we meeting in the middle? I do think that Jeep went into purpose without brand purpose, without thinking, wait a minute, we might offend a marginalized group of people who don't feel like we're meeting in the middle. Let me tell you, if some of my problems that I've had with race in America could be just solved with meeting in the middle, sign me up. I will be on the next bus to Kansas.
Let's talk about that. Brandi, let's talk about that, because diversity was a big issue for a lot of people. There was an intentional effort to address issues of diversity in some of the ads. Obviously, the Amazon ad stands out as a shining example of a great ad that was also done entirely with a Black cast. I mean, it's just like they really try to express their brand in terms of a reflection of the country. Who was successful? Who was the most successful during the game? Who kind of left you hanging? What are your thoughts on the diversity issue here in the game?
Yeah, I don't want to keep, harping on Amazon, but yes. So Amazon, yes, that was wonderful. M&M's with Dan Levy, very openly proud LGBT plus and Indigenous people advocate. And then with the Toyota with the Olympics commercial, we don't really see representation of those with diverse abilities. I don't say disability, I say diverse abilities. So that was really powerful to see that representation for diverse abilities. I cannot recall.
I actually prefer the term handicap, because it's just like a handicap means I'm so good, I need to be brought back so that everybody can catch up to me.
Really? You don't like diverse ability? Like you are?
I'm just kidding with you.
Ability than others?
No, I've had a long time to think about this, being a handicapped person, and it's just like, I look at my handicap as being like a golf handicap. I mean, it's just like, you got to put a handicap on me to keep me from surging ahead in the score. So, I mean, it's just like different, but it's like I'm just putting that out there. I'm not having a problem with it, but I really did appreciate the Kia ad for the exploration of the Paralympians.
I did too. And like I said, I don't know, Bob, if you can recall, you've been doing, looking at Super Bowl ads for quite some time. Have you ever recalled a commercial so openly showcasing or representing diverse abilities or handicapped individuals?
I mean, the Olympics ads always bring out the Paralympians.
Super Bowl. I mean, not the Olympic ads.
Yeah, Super Bowl, it was kind of unusual to have representation in that vein, and I think that was really great. The world's biggest ad game actually had exposure to people of different abilities. That's fantastic. I mean, I totally love that. Showing diverse races throughout the casting was, I think, fairly good. Although it's just like Whitney did have the unusual insight. She thought that during the Bud Light lemonade or light Bud seltzer ad that the black people were taking more of a beating by the lemons than other people. But I think that might have been a little bit overstated.
I was going to say, I didn't see that. Okay. I just didn't like the lemons, but I thought everyone was getting beaten equally. I thought it was quite equitable. But
I think it was quite equitable as well, but it was kind of a funny comment.
You must be confused. Budweiser wasn't in the Super Bowl. I'm not sure what ad you're talking about.
Let's talk about that Bud Light ad. Let's talk about that Bud Light ad. It's just like the Bud Light ad did well in the polls. I'm like surprised as hell because nobody understood it. I mean, I still have people coming up to me and saying, who are these people and why were they in this commercial? I mean, people weren't connecting the fact that all these different actors had played some part in some kind of Budweiser commercial, Bud Light commercial somewhere in the past. And nobody was getting it. I mean, except for maybe industry people. So it wasn't an effective ad in the end, or was it just a sizzle reel for the brand?
It was still funny. People getting hit in the face with lemons from the sky.
Not that one. No, not that. The Legends
not that
one, Jason. The Legends with like post.
Oh, yeah. That did. I'm surprised that one did well. That one fell flat for me. I agree with that.
Yeah, I didn't even recognize half of those people.
It was the orientation video for Budweiser.
That's really funny.
You know, it was funny was, Post Malone coming out first. I'm just like, yeah, he was last year's talent, but it's kind of the least associated Bud Light personality when you put him all together. Why are we doing this? Why are we focused on this? It seems such a strange ad overall.
It was really strange.
What did people think about the Indeed work?
Quite frankly, I missed the Indeed work. What was somebody else has to comment on that one?
No, I was going to ask, what was it?
So they were essentially talking about, they're a place you can go to look for a job, and they were really kind of showcasing the reality that many people in America are facing, but did it in a very way that's authentic to who they are, their brand, what they actually deliver for people. I thought that work was very good. But nobody else remembers it, so
I don't recall.
It didn't make an impact on me.
The jobs, I keep thinking of the 9 to 5, which I didn't. I love Dolly.
And apparently what they did as well is, and I also missed it completely. You actually really take a hell of a chance when you try and be like Google last year and try and get everybody crying. But I think what they did, from what I heard, is they were actually placing ads, and they were actually showing ads of people who'd lost their jobs and giving them free placement. There was something that they did that actually people that were paying attention were aware of, responded to really, really positively. But I think obviously it's concerning that none of us actually have any clue what the hell that was.
I kind of remember it coming on, but not being interested in it. It didn't really faze me. But that doesn't make it an ineffective ad. It just makes it ineffective on me.
I think the messaging was really good. They had, I don't remember the tagline, but it was a bracket tagline that they subbed in, graduates and people laid off and, everybody that's looking for a job, and they had real people that were looking for a job. I think the messaging was really strong. And if you are unemployed or looking for employment, I think it probably caught your attention. But it was a little forgettable for me as well. It was a Hope commercial. Hope commercials are hard to remember typically.
Yeah.
What about anybody have a particular dog that they want to talk about? I mean, something that really, really sucked in your opinion that we haven't discussed so far? Anybody have one that just kills them? Like Squarespace was a big disappointment for me. The 5 to 9 re-recording of Dolly Parton's song 9 to 5. It was just so forgettable. It really didn't resonate with me. Anybody else find one that they didn't like?
I agree with you with Squarespace, but I will say something. Not the one I didn't like. I didn't like the Squarespace, yes. But you didn't bring this up earlier, and I just want to point this out for the brands that normally advertise that didn't. You didn't say Pepsi. Pepsi didn't advertise. However, they sponsored the halftime show. So, of course, you see like the Pepsi halftime show, which in and of itself got various reactions. And I'm a huge Weeknd fan, and I just sat in my living room like, what's happening? But even though Pepsi didn't advertise their brands, right? So like Frito-Lay and various brands. So again, with the whole, I'm not advertising, but I'm going to tell you I'm not advertising, but I'm sponsoring the halftime show and then my other brands are advertising. That I don't like.
Disingenuous.
Did
Right?
Pepsi say they weren't advertising like the
Yeah,
others?
they
They
prided
did.
Oh my
themselves.
God.
They did.
I
They
didn't
said
realize
like
that.
we're not advertising. Like we feel it is our imperative not to advertise. By the way, did you see the weekend? Like we're like really?
Well,
That
and they
out.
advertised their number 2 and 3 products, which is Mountain Dew and
And
Doritos.
Frito-Lay.
And
Right?
actually,
So-
Mountain Dew. I hated the Mountain Dew ad. I hated that ad.
The
I don't really understand that brand though.
Cheetos, I mean, the Doritos, it's funny, but again, that's to Bob's question, like not the ad per se. I don't like this air of, dishonesty or, like I'm priding myself that we're going to take the money and, give the money, spend it where, it needs to be spent. Like, don't say that. Like, let's all be honest about what we're doing here. That's not hang up.
So, I loved the Mountain Dew ad, but for different reasons, and I'll tell you why. Because you're watching the ad, and same thing like Reddit, and you can win $1 million.
Yeah.
For being able to. I mean, that's like, this is what you need to use. What you need to do in the Super Bowl is either tell people if they've lost their job, they can give their Hyundai back. Or do what Denny's did, which is free Grand Slam breakfast, and get people to come back to your godforsaken outlets. I'm just saying that for for emphasis. I've never been in a Denny's. I don't know whether God has forsaken them or not. But you want to take advantage of that. I went to Twitter and I must have guessed about 5 or 6 times, because you know what, I could use $1 million. I'm sure we all can. But I was disappointed by the fact that when I went back the next day, all I saw across Mountain Dew's Twitter account was just tweet after tweet after tweet, with just more cutesy one-liners about the ad itself. No, I still don't know if anybody won the $1 million, and I'm not sure why they wouldn't have actually taken advantage of that and used that opportunity. So, it's just sad when you actually have a moment like that you don't utilize that moment. So I still have no idea whether anybody won it.
They did dominate social mentions, Mountain Dew, because of that incentive.
The one series of ads, and they ran an awful lot of ads during the Super Bowl, and I think all of them were fairly ineffective because they didn't communicate well enough what the brand was about, really, truly, was probably the Paramount Network ads that were trying to talk about the Paramount Plus streaming service, which is the rebranding of CBS All Access, which is already a confusing situation, and they seem to make it even more confusing. It's like, why are all these, okay, we get it that all these famous characters are associated with Paramount, but they didn't get across that now we get this to be a streaming network and this is why I should want it. I mean, it wasn't effective at communicating to me. Did anybody else like those?
It felt like a parody. It felt like
it didn't feel like it was.
And if you didn't have the pre-story that it was CBS, then most people have no idea that Paramount and CBS are connected in any way whatsoever.
Because it's Viacom CBS. It's just like I don't think people put together that Viacom owns Paramount. It's just like all these different connections were not made in that ad, and it just left me completely lost. I knew from reading up on it ahead of time what the ad was trying to communicate, but it didn't communicate it very well at all. Everybody else agrees, I guess. No discussion or debate.
It was also just a bit linear with the storytelling. Oh, there's a mountain in the logo. Let's make the commercial about a mountain.
Yep.
So let's talk before we go, because we're running out of time, and I want to get to this one last question that we kind of talked about it. We kind of touched on the idea that that there could be a shift going on in the way that brands approach the Super Bowl, and that we may see a lot of these brands return. We may not see a lot of these brands return. Which do you think it's going to be? I mean, predict the future for me, guys. Are we going to see all the same brands that used to advertise come back once the COVID outbreak is done? Or are we going to see, going forward, an increased interest from challenger brands, from brands that don't normally advertise in the Super Bowl? Will they be coming back? Will there be more brands banging on the door of the Super Bowl to get involved? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's going to be a hybrid, kind of what Rosemarie and Joe both said, in terms of you're going to have the usual suspects. You're going to have, the brands who are, the counterculture brands. I think this hybrid model worked. Just like if you think about, Bob, we didn't know, and the NFL didn't know, was the season going to be successful without having fans in stadiums, right? People at home, not tailgating, what have you. Were you still going to have the same energy level and the same kind of, yeah, Super Bowl, yeah, football? Like, was it going to work? And you just have to try and see what happens. Oh, we'll have a couple of fans. We'll have a couple of people. It won't be full. I think this hybrid model, I think it's just like all of us, like, working from home, remote work culture is emerging. Now we might have, when it's safe to go back in the office, you might be in the office 2 days a week and then home 3 days a week. I think for the Super Bowl, I think this is now, we've seen, the new players, some of the, like I said, the usual suspects. I really do think it's going to be a hybrid model. And to just echo what Joseph said, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, much less Super Bowl 2022. So even, when it's safe, whatever that means, you still have to experiment and say creatively, and from a budget ad spend perspective, we got to try different things to see if different things work. So I say I vote for hybrid model.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be the kind of like the up and comers who really want to make their mark and see the Super Bowl as the way to do that. I mean, the most famous Super Bowl commercial of all time was the Apple, 1984 commercial. And they were an upstart at that point in time. And that, many ways you could argue from a marketing perspective, at least, that really put them on the map. So
yeah, sales. The game is littered with opportunities like that have been taken advantage of. I mean, Salesforce really got their first big break by doing a Super Bowl ad. It was a terrible ad, but they did it. Same with GoDaddy. We hated the GoDaddy ads, but they built an entire business on doing a Super Bowl ad. So, I mean, yeah, there is a case to be made for brands that want to break into the big spotlight. It makes sense to pony up the cash and do a Super Bowl ad.
One thing to think about is that, I think 2022 is going to be a banner year for Super Bowl ads. And, some of it is that you did have all of these legacy brands that are going to step back into the spotlight and take those spots. But also, 2021 is the biggest IPO year since the .com boom. I mean, It's a massive IPO year. So you have all of these new up and coming, mostly tech brands, but not all of them. I mean, you look at Chobani coming on, you look at Oatly, it's going to be a $10 billion IPO. These companies are multi-billion dollar companies, multi-billion dollar challenger brands stepping into a little more money, a little more power. And I think they're all going to look for where they can spend that and make a big splash. And obviously the Super Bowl will take a big piece of that.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and make a very bold prediction that next year we're going to see the return of Quibi. And I don't know. It's just, I feel it in my bones.
They're already selling off Quibi's assets. I think that's pretty much not going to happen.
I'll tell you. Yeah, exactly. No, Quibi on a Paramount mountain. I think what we'll see, I think we'll see all the usual, safe, lazy suspects coming back in a big way, and the prices will continue to increase, and it's still, the biggest and the only game in town. And I think that, I think that's a safe bet. That said, and I cannot remember the name to save my life, and I don't even remember what product it is, but there was one called Mr. Scrunchy or Mr. Crunchy, or I don't know what it was. It was the most insane brand name. And I remember thinking to myself, what the hell is going on right now? But I know one thing, that the next time I see that name, whatever it represents and whenever it is, I'll remember it, and I'll remember it. I won't even know why I remember it, but it will be because of the Super Bowl.
Are you talking about the Sasquatch? Are you talking about the Sasquatch ad?
Yeah.
No, it was a brand called Mr. Scrunchy or Mr. Crunchy or Mr. It was some ridiculous name that I'd never heard of before. But I remember thinking to myself, I won't remember this name or this brand or this ad tomorrow. But the next time somebody mentions it, there'll be a connection. And I think that's the one thing that the Super Bowl has always given us. It's always given us that name recognition. For all the critiques, that come from loudmouth, big mouth, foul mouth people like myself, the fact is there are many reasons to advertise on the Super Bowl. And one of the biggest ones, for example, sometimes is when you want to, sway over that large distributor and show them that you're, playing in the big leagues and you're looking for shelf space or distribution in a supermarket, or you just want to get a certain number of tickets to be able to give to your vendors or your channel partners. So there are many, many reasons to do that. Fortune, as I said earlier, will favor the opportunists and the brave and the challengers, but expect, the 800-pound gorillas to come back with a vengeance.
Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Brandi Boatner. You can find her at IBM.com. It's a little company. You may have heard of it. So, Brandi, tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
So I just want to promote for everyone, it is Black History Month, but we all know every month is Black History Month. Mm-hmm. I just ask that everybody take this time to reflect, remember, and recognize those Black Americans who made this great country what it is today.
Yeah, it's been a really particularly interesting Black History Month this year. Maybe it's because I'm watching more MSNBC. They're doing a lot of great opportunities for guests to share their favorite Black American story, and it's really educational and really a great opportunity. So you should all pay attention to these things going on in the marketplace right now. Joseph Jaffe, you can find him at coronatv.show. That's the home of Corona TV, his daily podcast, video streaming, whatever we're going to call it, show that is really taking off. Joe, congratulations. So what would you like to talk about?
Thank you. Just don't call it a webinar or a call. Sometimes people are like, I really enjoyed being on
it's
your
call.
It's your Clubhouse.
Like,
yeah, I'm going to be. Speaking of which, I'm quite active on Clubhouse this week. No, I would just say I think I would like to defer 87.3% of my plug to exactly what Brandi said, and let's give credit where it's due at a time when it is needed more than ever. And, the one thing that I will add to that is on Friday, I had a show that was themed health and wellness and fitness. I had Lee Odin, Peter Shankman, Dave Rendell, my sister, who actually was my first guest ever on the show, and Justin Levy. And it was just a show that I'm still thinking back on, that was about motivation and about physical achievement, and it really touched me and it affected me. And I just think right now this is a time for us to focus on our mental health for sure, but also our physical health, and just recognize how intertwined the two are, and how important it is just to stay active and moving. Move our body, move our minds, move our souls, and just keep moving. So, whether you want to watch that episode or not, I'm not plugging the show as much as I just think there were some very inspirational voices and messages, and and I've put it on my Linktree, which is linktree.com/JaffeJuice. It's the first link. It's inspiring.
Oh, that sounds great, and the show is worth checking out. So if you have not checked out an episode of Corona TV, do so. Next up, we have Jason Keath. Jason runs Social Fresh at socialfresh.com. It's not only a conference company. I think a lot of people, Jason, think that you run just conferences, but you do all kinds of educational opportunities on the social media front. So tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone noticed, but conferences aren't happening as much lately. So I've had a lot more time to do consulting and training, which we've had a big influx of. So, I mean, if you work in social media, if social media is a part of your brand role or your agency role, we are the person to keep you in the know. There's no one doing what we're doing. I'd say, check out our newsletter. We have a weekly email newsletter where I just dive into a specific social media topic each week and break it down of what's working, what's coming in the future of the industry. And you can get that at socialfresh.com/subscribe.
Awesome. Yeah, they always do such great work. So you definitely want to check out Jason's company. And if you have any questions about social media, get in touch with them. Last but not least, Rosemarie Ryan co-founded one of the coolest little shops out there called Co-Collective at cocollective.com. It is a phenomenal company doing some amazing work. Tell us a little bit about it, Rosemarie, and tell us what you'd like to promote.
Thanks. I mean, when we started the company, God, it's been almost 10 years now. But when we started the company, we talked a lot about this notion of story doing, which is, the idea that brands and companies need to get clear about their story, and then they need to actually build it into the experiences and the products and their services, not just their advertising. And I think that, certainly now, we talked a bit about this on this podcast, but everyone's talking about having a purpose and businesses and brands needing one of those. I don't think a lot of people are really thinking about actually how putting that purpose to work. And so, my plea to any company who's thinking about going down that road, don't do it unless you actually want to do something about it. Like, think about how you can take that and build it into something that is sustainable and really is going to make a difference long term.
Yeah, and this place, I mean, what you've built, Rosemarie, is phenomenal. I mean, it always has such great talent in your ranks and so many really smart people working on these really first-class brands, doing a lot of great work. Really impressive. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. We would appreciate your ad dollars. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. I'm going to give the fair this week, even though in my heart, I love the Amazon one, Brandi. I think the Amazon one really touched me. The Rocket Mortgage ads surprised me with a truly memorable ad that clearly communicated a benefit and was pretty funny, or as the ad would say, I mean, definitely funny. So what are your thoughts on this one?
I did like it. And I will say, as someone, I think I may have heard Rocket Mortgage, but this year I made the decision I'm going to buy a house this year. And I've had like some people say, good for you. And then I've had some people be like, but you're going to buy it by yourself? What about a man? And some other things. But the Rocket Mortgage, I'm like, oh, so this is what it's like when you're a homeowner. These are things. So I do think I agree with you, Bob. It was funny and a little bit surprising. Obviously, I'm still with Amazon, but I do think it's a fair call that it was a funny kind of get the message across commercial.
Now, the fail for this week, I'm going to give to a very unusual one. I thought this was incredibly clever. Well, not clever, but just kind of opportunistic. It was apparently there was a post-match interview with a cricketer, if you know about cricket. I guess, Rosemarie, you're the best person to go with on this one as far as people who know about cricket. Cricket is a sport. You in America may not know it, but it is a sport. And Dom Bess was giving a post-match interview. He's playing for England against India, and the advertising board behind him falls right on his head, and he keeps going, which was just great for him. But it shows me that advertising always gets in the way, even when it's not online.
I thought it was hilarious.
People already loathe the ad industry. The last thing we need is ads that are actually physically attacking people.
And listen, I know cricketer.
It was interrupting him like the worst advertising does. I mean, it totally interrupted. He was right in the middle of talking about, how fabulous the game was, and they had a huge win. And it hit him, and he actually did say, wait, I've completely lost my train of thought. What was I saying again? And the worst advertising can do that. It can totally stop you thinking.
Perfect.
Well, as a South African, that would be, I know cricket as well, that would be called going out for a duck. Well, insider joke there for us Commonwealthians.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the foul of this week I'm going to give to Apple. Apple overly aggressively attacked another company called Prepare, which was about preparing meals, because they had a logo that they said seemed a little too close to the Apple logo. I don't know about you, Jason, but I looked at this ad over and over again. I'm like, these logos side by side, there's no way that this Pear logo in any way can be confused with the Apple logo. I mean, there's not even close. And the end result of all this money spent on legal bills and causing all this headache for this small startup is the fact that the startup had to put a straight line on the leaf, and the logo looks substantively no different than it did before.
It's the same logo. Yeah. I mean, it's a great example of having to rein in the legal team and many people missing that. And I'm just hoping that there was like a silver lining, and maybe that this is the most PR mentions that the Prepare app has ever gotten. I'm hoping that people got some downloads out of it. Who knows?
Who knows? But it was just egregious the way this was handled. So, well, anyway.
Sad.
If you have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it, comment online, use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
It's like, you know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly.
You have to call this episode Dr. Squatch. Because otherwise you have to, because otherwise, you know, that's the Easter egg. You have to.
I vote no to that. That sounds bad.
I think there's probably better ones to go with, but I'm not even sure.
Because, I said Mr. Scrunchy or Mr. Crunchy. We never revealed that it was Dr. Squatch.
I think everybody's just going to assume you were making it up. Or it was a local ad.
It wouldn't be the first time.
You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.